Welcome to the 13th week after Pentecost. It is Thursday, August the 22nd, 2024. This is the Manna at the Tap podcast, where we as a community actively seek the spiritual nourishment our souls crave. I'm Gloria, your fellow traveler on this spiritual journey, and together we offer and receive insights and interpretations from the daily lectionary readings, which provide the manna designed to nurture our spiritual growth. There has always been speculation about when Christ will return to earth to gather his body of believers called the church. Dates have been set at various times during the last 2,000 years since his ascension, and we are still here. The lectionary reading of First Thessalonians chapter 5 verses 1 to 11 is Paul's directive on how we are to live in anticipation and hope of Christ's return, even though we do not know the time or the season this will take place. It was the Apostle Paul who started the community in Thessalonica. It was a community of Jews and Gentiles, and as a newly formed community, Paul sent Timothy, his co-worker, to make sure false teachers were not infiltrating them. After Timothy returned, Paul wrote this first letter of encouragement to them. There had been some misunderstandings in the community about the return of Christ, and some took the position that if his return was imminent, it was time to prepare and to look with expectation and hope toward that end. Now, the lectionary text is part of a larger unit of text beginning in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 13, up to and including the lectionary text of chapters 5, verses 1 to 11. Like the community, we too may have similar questions. So let's follow along as Paul unpacks what it means for the believer to have hope in the coming of Jesus Christ. It was not that the community needed new information regarding their faith. They could rely on the knowledge they already knew, and that knowledge was that they had a secure faith, the same faith that connected them to Paul and he to them. So while the day of the Lord is unknown, the community knew it would come when it was least expected, so one had to be vigilant. Paul reminded them of three important things. Firstly, Jesus died for us, giving us salvation. And that's verses 9 to 10 of chapter 5. Secondly, he died for us so that whether we are alive or asleep, we will live together with him. And that's verse 10. Thirdly, he urged the community to encourage one another. They were not to grieve as those without hope who died before Christ's return. And that's verse 13 of chapter 4. They were to calm down because the God who raised Jesus from the dead will also raise those who have died, and he will bring them with him to gather those who are still alive, because the coming of Christ is for all believers. Those who are alive are not to wait in fear and trepidation, but they're to live with hope and the assurance that they are the children of light. Hope is praising God for salvation and the ongoing life with Christ, whether alive or asleep. Now, the obvious question the community wanted answered, and we may wish to have it answered as well, is when this will happen. Paul told them their concerns for the time and the season were only known to the Lord, but the day of the Lord would come unexpectedly as a thief at night. A thief does not give advance notice of their coming, and Jesus had already said in the Gospel of Mark, not even the angels in heaven knew. Paul said it would be abrupt, like a woman's labor pains, and those who are complacent and feel that all is peace and security will feel sudden destruction, and there's no escaping for those who trust in their own power instead of God's. As part of the community of Christ, the community was to see themselves as people of the light and not be caught in the dark by surprise. Nighttime would reveal who is alert, who is asleep, and who is drunk. As soldiers of Christ, they needed to put on their armor and remain hopeful and faithful. They needed defensive armor. As Paul wrote in his letter to the Ephesian community, they were to wear the breastplate and helmet of faith, hope, and love. You see, a Roman soldier wore a hard metal breastplate, also called a heart guard. Paul was recommending a breastplate of hope, emphasizing God leading us to salvation, restoration, and wholeness. Their focus was to encourage one another and build up each other because during times of anxiety, no one can go it alone, nor should they try. I suggest that we heed Paul's advice when we become anxious about the future. Let's reframe our thinking and live out God's love for us as we encourage one another. I'm not sure if you heard the one repetitive word I kept using, and that word was hope or hopeful. And let me give you a biblical interpretation of the word hope. It is trust, wait for, and look for, expecting something beneficial in the future. And our hope is in Christ and in his commitment to us.